Hey, peace world. Thanks for pressing play on another Pay Me No Mind sports and entertainment podcast, YouTube channel, what have you. I don't like getting no update. Just came on tonight to talk about Billions, season 4, episode 3. I believe this one was named Chickentown. I really wasn't sure what to expect when when I saw the title last week when I was looking through the looking ahead in the season. Kind of really wasn't sure what Chickentown was going to be all about. But now we see it was basically part of a plot for and it didn't work. Oh, it did. So it was basically part of a plot this week for a play that Axe Capital was making to it was one that was devised by Dollar Bill, and him trying to be the go-to guy, continue to be one of the better earners at Axe Capital. So but backing up to get into the synopsis really quick, checking it out on IMDb. Let's see. So the synopsis for this week's episode, like I said, Chickentown. Axe has to step in when a tip from Dollar Bill goes south quickly. Chuck faces a threat to his new career aspirations as Attorney General. Wendy and Axe develop a plan to derail Taylor's business, and Taylor receives an important guest. So really quickly, just one there's one user review out there on IMDb from a user named Axes and Allies, and it just says their comment was another fine episode. The sharp dialogue and acting always puts Billions ahead of the other shows. I love that Axe and Chuck are now looking out for each other's interests. This season is moving in the right direction. All the characters are written into the show very well, and all their backstories are explained very well, with just enough time focused on each one of them to fit into the plot when the time is right. Love this show. I would agree with pretty much all of that. This episode right here kind of I don't know. It kind of didn't take us anywhere. Some of the highlights. One thing that I have here down at the bottom on the scroll is just, are they all just too smart? And originally when I was going to ask that, I was referencing Taylor Mason specifically. But then just when I was thinking about the show the other day, like, everybody on here is so damn smart. Wendy has a very high IQ. Chuck obviously is a very brilliant dude. Axe is what he is. Taylor is what they are. Gregor, nothing can get past him. John Malkovich's character. Wags isn't smart per se or a genius, like the rest of them, but he knows his role and he does his job well. Hall is very the security guy that Axe contracts or has as his security guy. We haven't seen a lawyer this year. I forget what his name was, but we haven't seen him this year. But everybody is so damn smart. It's almost like it kind of pushes the writer's room into a tough situation, because when you get to the end of the season, how do you have the major climax or conflict that the season actually resolves? Like, that idea has to be so grand in the scale of it that it's ridiculous. Because like I said, most of the players here are just so damn intelligent. But looking at this one, the show opens with Wendy and Axe, putting together an idea for the next attack on Taylor and Taylor Mason Capital. And like I said, one of the references, everything that these individuals know is they get into a discussion on who was the creator of Chinese water torture, and that it really wasn't, it really wasn't the Chinese. And Wendy, we wouldn't even expect her to know anything about this, but Wendy, in fact, knows that it was actually an Italian person, I guess, who created the that type of torture. But it quickly moves into the Chicken Man, or the chicken. I wrote it down as the Chicken Man, but the Chicken Man was the individual who was going to, and this kind of reminded me of Trading Places, the old comedy with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, with the juice report, the orange juice report. But they quickly go into some play for $300 million if they fix this situation. Which gets me into thinking, with looking at Axe, if I fast forward to one of my other parts down here, Axe is both book smart and whatever his IQ level is, he's very smart, but then he also is very crafty and works his different tricks that he works in terms of, earning money and accumulating more wealth. And so it was slick but it shows that he's by himself though. And when he gets this camera footage from Hall, his security guy, uses some Israeli invented camera to be able to look through protected or security glass and get this image off of the wall that of this derivative that Taylor and her father, Kevin Pollak, were putting together on how, her next way or their next way to earn money in the stock market or whatever. And once Hall gets this information and brings this huge formula to Axe has to dig into deciphering this or working out whatever this stuff is saying all by himself. He doesn't have anybody, that he can hand that off to. Kind of the heavier lifting at Axe Capital. So I thought that was pretty slick, and that's part of Bobby's game, or his genius, is that he can play, the textbook stuff, and then he also can respond and react very appropriately, or as necessary out in the real world, to the information that he's able to come across and manipulate and use to his advantage. So that's one slick thing about him. Another thing that's interesting here, that's catching my attention, is the mirror between, or the parallels between Axe Capital and Taylor Mason Capital. Taylor has her security guy is some brother named Cook, who does the same thing that the same service that Hall provides for Bobby Axelrod at Axe Cap. Wags is, I guess, the business or the office manager, I believe, is Wags' official role. And then on the other side, on Taylor Mason Capital, I believe her name is Sarah. So we're seeing the teams, if you will, before a jump ball or when they're announcing the teams and they're all lined up, we're starting to get the players on both sides and getting a sense of how they operate and how they support the head person, whether it be Bobby or Taylor. So that's pretty slick. And, along the same lines, Taylor, and they even showed it in the recap this week, that Taylor left Axe Capital because she didn't like the way that Bobby was doing certain things, and the way that they were pushed to make different decisions or make different things happen, and they didn't like being manipulated in that way, and kind of, somebody putting their thumb on them. So it's kind of slick to see how they are setting up, how they're setting up their shop but in a way, it's still some of the same basic principles are still in play. So, also in this episode, of course, Connerty is not pleased that Chuck is getting back into the world of public service. So he has put one of the old cases that he was looking into. He's passed that along to a reporter who was working on an article to help or hurt Chuck's campaign. And of course, Chuck has to go into damage control and do what he does best in, working somebody or turning somebody, which happened to be the source of this this article, who was a whistleblower that from a previous case of Chuck's, who he didn't finish this case. He didn't prosecute this sugar vape company because apparently his father, which Chuck Sr., it always leads back to Chuck Sr., his Chuck Jr.'s troubles. But it was a friend of it was basically a favor for Chuck Sr.'s friend who had some ownership or was the CEO or some executive at this sugar vape company. So, father or Chuck Sr. has created another hurdle for his proud son to have to overcome. And it seems like Chuck is just tired at this point. He's down here fighting in the mud. He doesn't have all of the resources and the cachet of being a U.S. Attorney. He's out here just, fighting tooth and nail. I mean, it's a savage world for him. And he constantly has to find ways to encourage himself and to fight on. And he doesn't have many friends, which eventually you had to expect that towards the end of the show or at the end of the show, he has to go and ask for help from Bobby, from Bobby himself, and with his money and the other, brain power as well. So another interesting thing here was just the introduction of like I said, Kevin Pollak, who plays Taylor's father. You kind of didn't know who he was when he got off of the elevator at Taylor Mason Capital. I kind of was getting the feeling that that's who it might be, but of course it had to reveal itself in a way that's kind of signature to how things happen on Billion, and especially in particular with dealing with Taylor. But it basically comes out that is Taylor's father. Obviously, it's been it's been hard for him to adapt to who Taylor has become, and looking at them as them, and all of that stuff, the pronouns that Taylor prefers to be referred to as. So it's some tension in their relationship, and you really didn't know what was going on between them, but they get to working on that derivative in the office. And, they kind of play us as the audience. Here's two very brilliant people putting together something very complicated and high level. And actually, we find out later that we were being duped as well as Hall and Axe Capital were. So one of the references this week, I said last week, the different references that the dialogue, the writers make references to all kinds of facts and historical stuff and music, movies, sports. This week we had a reference about the White Sox and Shoeless Joe. When I forget what he said, Rothstein or something was the person behind that who made the White Sox throw the World Series, I believe, back in the day. And that was a pretty slick one. That was a pretty funny one. Obviously, I already mentioned the Chinese water torture story or reference or the analogy that they used. One of my favorite ones, obviously, with me doing boxing here on the channel. Of course, my ears perked up when I believe her name is Sacker, who works in the U.S. Attorney Office, who's actually Ahmad Rashad and Felicia Rashad's daughter. She references Triple G when talking to the individual who Rhodes flipped and got to turn down, walk away or walk back his statements in the article that was being put together. She actually goes to flip him again back in the favor of the, getting that article done and getting that story out there to damage Chuck. She is successful, which kind of shows some growth from her, because she was once under Chuck Rhodes's a part of his ranks. And so it was kind of slick that she showed some maturity and some growth, some development, and being able to undo a major move that Chuck was able to do when his back was up against the wall, and she was still able to flip the guy and get that story out there, which really has really sent Chuck reeling, and they go to this party, this fundraiser, and I'm getting ready to wrap up here, but they go to this party, him and Wendy go to this party at the casino to go shake hands and try to raise funds and whatnot. And they find out that, after the story was released and the word got out of what Chuck did, in his previous position, people were kind of cold on Chuck. Nobody wanted to take a picture with him and Wendy, and just lets him know that he's fighting an uphill battle in terms of, being elected or winning this election to become Attorney General. So the last thing here, another change we see is Axe. Actually, the whole chicken man plan went flat because the chicken man, who was an obese guy, probably morbidly obese, there was a reason why he could be depended on not to finish his job of counting all the, getting all the chicken inventory down south. But he actually, the chicken report that they were waiting on in Axe Capital to know how much money they were going to win or earn on this deal and what the plan that they put in place, the guy who was behind it all that they needed to play his part down in Arkansas actually passes away. So Dollar Bill jumps on a plane, goes down there to see what's happened and to try to make sure they protect the position that Axe Capital is or holds on the in what they were trying to do. So then to fix it, Dollar Bill was going to infect the chicken supply in the country and the food supply, really, ultimately. And so once Bobby and Wags catch wind of what they get an idea of what Dollar Bill is gonna do just to win, just so Axe Capital wins, they jump on a private jet, go down there and stop him cold in his tracks as he was getting ready to take a quarantine chicken into the rest of the chicken population. So Axe just showed it's a different side for him. That I think he said something about every once in a while you have to you can't win them all, and there has to be a cost benefit analysis. So that was a different side of Axe that we were able to see. And then lastly, in the closing scene, when Rose is just taking a beating, and just realizes that he needs serious backup, he basically bends a knee and asks Cap to help me out. Axe to help me out. I need some help. And then that's another reference to close out this show is, Bobby said, the last time you were on the other side of the law, I didn't feel our relationship wasn't so good. And they just make some references about Western movies and the 10-star or the star that the sheriffs used to rock back in the day. And cleaning and getting rid of and taking down the bad guys in Western movies. So that was kind of the last pop culture reference on this episode. That was kind of all of my notes from this show. Like I said, it was kind of a slower show. We had a showdown. Speaking of the Western thing, with the duel, we saw Taylor and Bobby go face to face and kind of call out the truce after, Bobby had spent the whole day breaking down that formula. And once he finished deciphering it and understanding that it was bait, it was intended to mislead him. So they had a face-to-face meeting, and they basically called a truce. But then we don't really know what that means, because when he went and got back in the car with Wags, he kind of was non-committal on whether or not they would, he would call off the dogs on trying to get Taylor back, and get revenge. So, but Taylor proposed a plan, as part of the truce, and we don't know. The last thing that I was thinking, and I might have just forgot what it was, I guess just moving forward, Cantu was not in this episode. We didn't see her at all, which is Axe's new partner and kind of love interest. I thought that relationship was going to take off and be key to whatever, but she wasn't even in this episode. No Gregor this episode. Taylor had an idea, or her second in command pitched an idea about going to Gregor to fix some problem when they realized that Axe was had launched an attack and was able to get in, compromise their security, and had set off some things with Taylor Mason's data that they had been breached, basically. And so no Gregor, and then what else? We haven't seen the one dude, Jeff Coat or something, Connerty's boss, Chuck Rhodes' old boss who fired him. We haven't seen him this season except for the first episode. We didn't see a whole lot of Connerty and the U.S. Attorney Office, this episode. So not a horrible episode, but just it just didn't accomplish a whole lot in a way, but like I said, it moved the story along. So pretty solid episode. Again, I tried to throw some links out there, on social media to invite some people in if you want to talk about the show, if you're a fan of the show. I see nobody accepted my invite. I'm not, it is what it is. But, we'll be here talking about it the rest of the season. And, if anybody comes along late and checks this out, as it's out here on my playlist, feel free to, hit me with any comments, comments as far as your favorite parts of the show or what your expectations are for the balance of the season. And, maybe your favorite pop culture reference or analogy that they've used, all of that type of stuff. So let me get on out of here. Peace.